Hello YouTube and welcome back. We've got another bit of an old style video with the gameplay behind and us doing a quick voiceover guide on this Maiev game explaining how to play Omega Buster Exodia, which is one of the strongest comps in the game right now and very likely going to be a strong comp in the game for a while. So as you see, we do start with a nice Swamp Striker triple. It is a little bit weird on Maiev because, you know, you kind of want a hero power on 6 gold, so we kind of have our forced line here. But it's still pretty nice to have that guaranteed triple lined up. And, you know, this guide is going to be less about how to play Maiev and more about the Omega Buster Exodia comp that we're looking for. So here you'll just see us doing sort of the normal Maiev stuff. We're gonna take the Tavern Tipper to take advantage of the fact that we actually are floating in gold here, and so it is a 3-4, and just play that. But everything else is just set up in a way to try and get that first triple to line up with a 6-drop, playing the normal reform curve. And this is pretty nice. We're actually going to freeze this because it will represent another pair, this mini Myrmidon. And we don't have much else going on, right? Everything else is a solo unit, so we might as well freeze the one spot as a pair here. And then everything else is, again, pretty straightforward here on Maiev. One thing with Maiev to think about, and this is just a general Maiev tip, is that when you do set up your triples, you do want to have an idea of usually what 6-drops you're looking for in what you're hoping to get. So here we'll just hero power that mini Myrmidon as expected, playing our spellcraft to just be as strong as possible for this fight, and, you know, try and preserve as much health as we can going up. We'll dodge quite a bit of damage clearing off these mummies, which is very nice. But we are still down to 27, and so your health total on Maiev always does make a big difference, but I've found that usually you're just kind of always going for the 6 and setting yourself up for that success anyways. And so here we just take the Tad with the hero power, as that will result in you know, the most econ for us to use later on in the game, since it all otherwise is the same. Here we don't hit anything, and so we're gonna roll and level, or level and triple, and then we'll roll after. And here we see Uther, Manted, and Omega Buster, and this is actually kind of a tough decision because Manted is the strongest unit here, but because we're at 27, and we have that other pair lined up, I was feeling that I kind of wanted to take potential direction in the Omega Buster and try and make something better than the Manted happen, because Manted doesn't really give direction and we don't really have any otherwise. We do end up finding the other triple on the roll, and so that is obviously why we sort of just hero power this Sully. It's the most gold. Normally you don't hero power on that turn, but because we are gonna just freeze and pick up this triple, we're not really losing a shop slot because we're mostly just focused on freezing anyways, so might as well hero power this elemental. And we end up hitting another Omega Buster, and immediately here, this is when you know, okay, this is obviously our direction. I passed the Sensei there because the issue with the Sensei is that it can buff those Omega Busters, and that prevents you from playing the Exodia build very well, because you want your busters to die to a Baron Tunnel Blaster that does 6 damage, and so if that Sensei buffs them to 7 health, the build becomes much more complicated immediately. And so we pass that, look for some other mechs, to bolster our strength here. And we see it's a big spike in how strong we are. And we are able to get the tie despite having a 70% win, but you know, we take the tie because our main goal here at 15 is to stay as healthy as possible. We are underneath the cap, but we don't necessarily die in one hit, and then just trying to win some of these fights. So from here, the main components of this build that we're looking for are Baron, of course, like you want with any Omega Buster build, Kangors, and Tunnel Blaster. Tunnel Blaster will allow us to use the Kangors and the Omega Busters to sort of guaranteed proc with the Baron, and then resummon those Omega Busters for a very strong setup. Now, because I am going to go for this build, I sort of reconsider the taunt here and decided I don't want to taunt up permanently the Omega Busters, because again, it does sort of prevent you from playing that Exodia setup, and that's really what we want our late game to look like. So instead, I'm gonna sort of go back and forth and then end up deciding not to use the taunt at all, rather just playing full strength by putting the extra mech in via the Kaboom bot, and then being gold efficient and holding this taunt for later should it be needed, because I feel strong enough with these mechs that I will win this fight. And so then I'm less worried about these Omega Buster procs going off, which is the primary concern when you're looking to taunt them, is that they just won't die. And so figuring that we're strong enough, which we are, that ends up being a good decision to hold off on that taunt here. And then we find the Tunnel Blaster, and so now we are committed to the line. We just need a Baron and a Kangors to really complete our setup. It's not the full setup, but it is extremely strong out the gate against pretty much anything besides some specific counters. We do roll down, and we're going to take our temporary taunt here. This is a bit of a hedge, or an in-between with the temporary taunt. Buffing up the Amalgam because that's the permanent unit. The other Murloc obviously will not stay, and so we'll use the temporary taunt. We can taunt up these Omega Busters to get strong, but we don't need to commit to that line. For the same reason, you do need to avoid module on these builds. We do see the module in shop, and that's not going to be something that's worth it, because again, we're just committed to having these busters dying as soon as possible, getting as many summons out of them as possible from the Kangors, and then using a Baron to have that result in a lot of stats. And you see here, you know, we get some decent stuff. We get some extra summons out of the Kangors, and it will just slightly be enough to get a win with those microbots, cleaning everything up at the end. So from here, again, we're looking for one more Kangors, a Baron primarily, and then eventually you can look to finish out with some different techs or Selfless. Selfless can be good. We see ourselves rolling past that one because it's not really necessary till we get the core of our build down, but it is useful later, and you will see that we do pick them up later on when there's a bit more priority on them as units. Against the Ghost, we sort of grapple with whether or not we want to play through, if we want to buy something in the shop or play the Baron just to be strong. You don't really want to die, so I do end up playing the Baron here with the 15 health, even though the Ghost is very, very unlikely to be strong enough, and we will sort of overkill because this is a huge power spike. We're not really board locking ourselves, and so we're not too worried about that the Mummy and the Bomb aren't permanent units. And we'd rather just not, take any risks or take any damage. And we're going to be rolling anyways, so deciding not to grab anything in the shop and instead rolling for the rest of the pieces, because that's sort of what an Exodia comp comes down to, is just assembling all the pieces until you have that winning board. So here you'll see us continuing to roll, again with the main focus in this case being Kangors, I end up taking a Deflecto here. That is just a mistake. I see Deflecto, I think, oh, that's a good unit. Yeah, no, it's not good in this situation. I talked about it on stream immediately after. I'm like, why did I do that? And I don't have a good answer for you. But I decided, well, since I bought the Deflecto, I might as well put it down. And then I can actually hero power this Tunnel Blaster and see if that will open up some possibilities for, a bigger version of this build later on. But, otherwise it's just like trying to be efficient using my gold here and not rolling since I only have that one gold, and there's a minimum amount of potential with the that hero powered Tunnel Blaster. So here we have a pretty easy time cleaning up the Varden, and that's going to be really nice because Varden was going for a Baron mech comp as well, and so that will put some of the stuff back in the pool and make it easier for us to find. So now we move on to our next turn, facing off against Jandis, and again, mostly rolling for the Kangors here. We do take the Selfless because it is playable, like I said, and now with most of our build done with that Baron secured, we are comfortable taking that Selfless. And then here, because our setup, makes it possible and the gold makes it possible, we're just going to grab that second Selfless. We sell out of the Deflecto instead of the bomb because the bomb obviously has slightly more strength with that death rattle going off. One thing to mention here is that our Selfless positioning is not great here because it does end up shielding some of the Omega Busters, and what you can do is play it second to prevent that from happening. Your Baron getting sniped, and you'll have a little bit more consistency on your board. The important thing to remember if you don't know how any of these Exodia Death Rattle comps work is that Death Rattles trigger left to right, so you need to be very sure about your order. And the one that we're considering here is we need the Omega Busters to die after the Kangors, so that the Kangors resummons. They all die at the same time, right? Because the first thing to go off is the Tunnel Blaster. It kills everything simultaneously, and then they all trigger at the same time. So having the Kangors in front means that they will resummon those Omega Busters that died, being the first two mechs that died each, and then the buffs from the Omega Busters go off, buffing those newly summoned Omega Busters from the Kangors. So that's how that setup works, and you'll see the Selfless here. See, it's second, so it triggers next, and then the Kangor summons, and then the Omega Busters summon. Unfortunately, there is the zap, but because we were able to get all the death rattle effects and buffs, obviously we're getting the lethal here against the Zarella. You see how strong our end setup is with a lot more Omega Busters to go. So from this point, we do have pretty much a perfect setup. We do level to look for like an Uther. To play around Zap. We saw Zap, and we actually do find the Uther. That's like the last finishing touch. And funnily enough, because we only need the one Selfless, because we're only shielding the Baron here in our setup, we can just cycle it through and use that other Baron that we picked up for kicks. I do freeze the Kangors here as a little joke. But I'm facing off against Ice Cold, who is a friend of the stream, and we figured we would play right just in case they had some funky stuff and were able to beat us. But unfortunately, or fortunately, they weren't able to, and we are able to take the win here. We get that shield on the Baron, we get all our summons, and it's just a bit too much to deal with, and that is the strength of this. It is, able to be played around, and you do need some good hits and stuff, but the strength when you actually hit all the pieces is just a very, very strong, and especially if you hit even a few pieces early, you can start to lethal people out of the game a bit quicker, and that just makes it far easier to end the game quickly, and you don't need to progress your board too much. And so this was enough to win this game, and I hope that makes how to play the Omega Buster Exodia a little bit more clear. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a comment below, and be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps a ton. Thanks for watching. As always, peace.